The untold reason Warren Buffett sold most of his chip and US bank stocks soon after buying them. TLT's inflation warning. This changes everything. Warren Buffett can literally control a huge part of the stock market in a strange way. There are so many people following Buffett's money moves in a 3-month lagging basis. I find that very interesting. Buffett always buys companies for long term rather than trading stocks frequently. He said, don't buy a stock for 10 minutes if you're not going to own it for 10 years. So why does the most respected investor sold most of Taiwan semiconductor maker after just holding it for 3 quick months? What about the US banks he also sold out of? Are we on the brink of a corporate debt crisis? Is the China-Taiwan risk growing too high? That it's suddenly flashing a red flag for Buffett. Why is TLT keep on falling now? What brought inflation back into the economy? What does retail sales and PPI say about where the yield is going? I will explain it all right after this. And of course, smash the like button. If you want to be my good boy, apply to write your first book with me. Welcome back to the Audacious Money Witch channel, where we talk about macroeconomy, stocks, bonds, and commodity markets. If you like any of these topics, you are intelligent. That's why you're here. And you know what to do. And push my button if you like what you see in today's video, because I can't push it from this side. This video is brought to you by my Patreon. If you are a good boy, go to patreon.com/magicalgoddesscheryl to add more meaning into your life. If you play your cards right and completely submit like my good boys do, then I will take you under my wing. Author of best-selling books, Goddess Cheryl. My good boys always get rewarded handsomely. You are such a good boy. You like hearing that, don't you? You want to get it into the bookstore. You want it to be real. You want it to be true. You need to be my client, don't you? Shares of TSMC dropped 6% earlier Wednesday after Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway dumped most of its stake just months after buying the Taiwanese chip maker's stock. The sale made up roughly 86% of the Omaha-based firm's position. It also marked an unusually quick turnaround for Buffett's company, which typically holds onto investments for years instead of a few months. Berkshire Hathaway first revealed its $4.1 billion stake in TSMC on November 14th. It's now down to about $618 million. By the middle of 2022, chip makers across the board had been reducing production to deal with oversupply issues. Last month, TSMC forecasted that its revenue could fall as much as 5% this quarter, and that it could face more weak demand. If Buffett buying TSMC is a bet that China won't invade Taiwan, then a quarter later selling 86% of the position sure sounds like a situation has changed. Looks like the war story is not over. Russia now demands the US prove it didn't destroy the key Nord Stream gas pipelines to Europe. We qualify the incident as an act of international terrorism that requires a comprehensive and independent investigation. A spokesperson for the Russian embassy to the US said in a statement on Wednesday. Last September, Explosions ruptured the Nord Stream pipelines and set the Baltic Sea boiling with leaking methane gas. It disrupted the supply of Russian gas to the continent and exacerbated a crippling energy crisis. Given Moscow typically supplied about 40% of Europe's natural gas. News of the blown-up pipelines sent European natural gas prices surging 11% to above 200 euros at the time, as worries about the risks to energy supplies to Europe grew. Following the explosion, US and European officials were quick to blame Russia. Sweden concluded that the damage to the pipelines was gross sabotage at the time. But those accusations have come under pressure after a discredited journalist, Seymour Hersh, made unproven claims. In a self-published article that the US partnered with Norway in a top-secret operation to blow up the pipelines. The White House called Hersh's story false and complete fiction. Meanwhile, Russia has welcomed Hersh's claims, saying it would bring consequences for the US. It wouldn't hurt that if the US, which claims the monopoly on the truth, shifted from empty accusations directed at us to the matter at hand and at least try to prove it wasn't involved in the destruction of the gas pipelines. The spokesperson said, "The Russian side won't allow the situation with the explosions at the critical energy infrastructure to be downplayed, especially given that there's no information about several undetonated explosives that have apparently remained on the seabed," he added. Russian diplomats issued dire warnings that war with US is close. The Kremlin's top diplomat has warned the Western involvement in Ukraine is nearing the point of no return. Meanwhile, Moscow's UN envoy declared that all of Russia's red lines have already been crossed. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Washington and several other Western states gave assurances to Moscow that the NATO alliance would not expand beyond Germany. However, in the years since, presidents have each allowed new members to join the alliance, all of them inching closer to Russia's borders. Starting in 2008, NATO has repeatedly declared its intention to someday allow Ukraine to become a member, again reiterating that pledge at a recent alliance summit. The move would cross the brightest of all red lines for Moscow, as was previously noted by current CIA Director William Burns. All the red lines have already been crossed by Western countries. There are already semi-direct involvement of NATO in the conflict because it's not only weaponry, but it's intelligence, he said. The big narrative is changing fast. From balloon hysteria to the UFO psychops. The real threat is who else? China? Knowing that those who really run the show never show their hands. China has been buying Russians cheap oil and gas for about a year, while the whole country is locked down, preserving the energy. Because of the lockdown, No one really knows what they are planning. They made it clear to take Taiwan sooner than later because of Nancy's unexpected visit. Meanwhile, US has been selling its own strategic petroleum reserve, draining to a historic low level. China is going to purposely push US inflation higher when it reopens. China reopened in January. Guess what? Based on the PPI, the Producer Price Index, which measures the change in input for companies, when producers face input inflation, the increases in their production costs are passed on to retailers and consumers. So this data is considered a leading indicator of inflation. The bond market, TLT, also believes inflation is back since January. China is trying to force the Fed into another policy mistake. Speaking of the Fed, Ms. Brainard's move to lead Biden's National Economic Council means the Fed will lose an influential top official who has advocated for a marginally less aggressive approach to raising interest rates. She had become one of the Fed's most persuasive policy doves. Officials think high inflation is likely to slow as lingering effects of the lockdown reverse, and who wants to minimize potential job losses. By contrast, the central banks, hawks, more readily embrace stiffer measures to curb inflation. So expect interest rates or bond yields to go higher for longer. For January, retail sales rose 3% versus 2% estimated. With food inflation where it is, and egg prices the big headline. But based on the Shopify's earnings, it reported a double beat, but the stock was sold off 15% during the day. In this earnings season, that's a first. If an unprofitable tech company beats on earnings, it automatically goes up by 10% plus. Not after TLT's inflation warning sign, though. This shows that disinflation is dead, and the economy will slow down again by inflation hurting folks' wallets. Everyone seems to be in a bit of a debt bind at the moment. The US government has run out of credit to spend. High inflation and interest rates have taken a bit of a bite out of debt-laden tech companies that expected 2020 era growth to continue. And US credit card debt reached nearly $1 trillion in the fourth quarter of 2022. Businesses that don't have cash to pay down debt loads may face the music in 2023. Economists at S&P Global Ratings forecast that speculative grade corporate default rates in the US and Europe will double this year alone. Wall Street is starting to pricing this in the market. Let's not forget the war has started. Let's hope it's just an economic war. At least that you can prepare by joining my Patreon to see every move that I make in the market during this hardest time for a decade. And this is my client's collaboration book. It's already yours, Adversity Equals Success. Such an amazing book with such incredible authors. Order your copy today. And my book, Time. You are such a good boy for watching my video right till the end. Bye.